Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's excited for today's presentation. This is the Data Science and AI Hub's monthly webinar series, which is focused on exploring generative artificial intelligence in academia. My name is Mark Miazga. I'm the director of the University of Minnesota Survey and Assessment Services Office, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. The DSAI, as a reminder, is an inclusive hub driving innovation dedicated to the communication, coordination, and amplification of the current data science and artificial intelligence activities at the University of Minnesota. I'm excited today that we have Dr. Pani Kendeou, who is a researcher and all things artificial intelligence in the University of Minnesota's College of Education and Human Development. Dr. Kendeyou's title today is AI Literacy in PK through 20 Education, Theoretical, Practical, and Policy Considerations. The talk abstract is as follows: realizing the full potential of AI in education requires a multidisciplinary and holistic framework that can inform research, practice, and policy. The focus on AI literacy across the entire PK through 20 spectrum is particularly important as it recognizes that AI integration is not just a higher education concern, but needs to be thoughtfully implemented from early childhood through graduate education. In this talk, Dr. Kendeou will discuss current frameworks of AI literacy and their implications for practice and policy in this context. Welcome, Dr. Kendeou.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, DSAI, for hosting and inviting. I'm going to share my screen and get us started here. Are we good with the sharing or not yet? All right, thank you. So today I plan to challenge a little bit some of our views and assumptions about AI literacy, and I hope that by the end of the talk, you have probably more questions than coming in, and if that's the case, then I probably did my job well. Let me begin by making the case as to why I think it is important to position AI literacy across the full developmental spectrum. What happens right now in our elementary and high schools will determine what kind of students will come to our universities. Are there going to be critical thinkers who know how to navigate this space and critically evaluate and collaborate with AI systems? Or are they going to be the students who ended up outsourcing a lot of their cognitive development and learning to AI systems? So understanding the full pipeline when it comes to AI literacy development will allow us to address the issue intentionally and systematically. Because right now, most of what's happening in education is anything but intentional. So let's see where we're at. What we have seen lately and over the past 18 months with a lot of intensity is an accelerating adoption of AI in education. And that's happening nationally, but it's also happening globally. And let's look at that from a data point of view. Some data that may make us feel a little bit uncomfortable or not, depending on our perspectives here. AI in education, Microsoft survey has been released recently. They did a global survey of teachers and students. Their teacher data are from all over the world. Their student data is mostly from the US, so keep that in mind. And of course, this is Microsoft, right? So keep that in mind as well. But it is very telling when we look at their report of how students are using AI right now. And this is K through 12, right? We see a lot of use that has to do with personal learning support. We see also some use that has to do with outsourcing some of that learning that should be happening in the context of classrooms, like doing the assignments for them. When we look at teachers, we see a similar but also a different pattern. We see a lot of usage that has to do with instructional design and efficiency, as you would expect. So there are some good patterns here, but there may be some alarming patterns as well. And this is because there is a big but. We see this increasing adoption, as I said, nationally and globally, but this is also happening without sufficient training or guidance. Where are we with respect to training and guidance? A recent report that just got published by Carnegie Learning, by some estimates, it posits that 40% of school districts provided some kind of training to their teachers and or students. This is 20% higher than it was last year, this time of the year. So definitely some improvement here. And when we look for guidance, again, about 40 to 43% of school or districts have adopted some kind of guidance on AI education. And this also almost doubled from last year. So clearly there is some movement towards training and guidance, but we're yet far from aligning with the kind of usage that we see at the same time. Now let's zoom out a little bit globally to see what's happening in the rest of the world. This map comes from Teach AI and is updated regularly. This is though almost a year old, so it may be the case that a few more countries have moved towards guidance. Now the purple countries show that they have adopted some kind of guidance. The light blue have not. And when you look at that map, it seems like a lot of large educational systems around the world are still figuring this out. But there are also some educational systems that have moved quite fast, like Australia and the United States that shows in purple. But if we zoom back in and we see what's happening in terms of educational guidance on a state-by-state basis, you will see that there is a lot of variability. If you are in a green state, then there is guidance that has been adopted. If you are in a gray state, you're pretty much on your own. But even with that guidance at the state level, when we look more closely, let's say in our case here in the Minnesota Department of Education guidance, it is pretty clear that there is guidance, but it is also pretty clear that it's left to each one of the schools or the districts to develop their own contextualized guidance and or policy and enact that on their own. So a lot of variability and a lot of uncertainty in terms of what exactly is happening in this space of guidance, but also training. So here is our headline. There is a gap between adoption and training. I think that's indisputable at this point. And by some reports, only about 40% of our US students and teachers have received any training at this point, even though adoption is relatively high. Now, and of course, you can challenge this, right? And you can ask, well, why is this a problem? This is fairly new. I mean, AI is not new, but generative AI systems that are used in school settings is probably something that is new. So let's see why that's the case. Why is it something that we need to be worrying about and also having more of a systematic approach to it? What happens when we have adoption without training? There is a disconnect that may result in being unable to harvest the potential benefits of AI in education and increasing the potential risks. Like with anything and everything that we do, right? There are benefits and risks. So in the absence of that training and guidance, the risks become higher, the benefits probably lower. This is what we know so far about potential benefits and risks. And of course, this list is not extensive, but it helps highlight what's the space that we're navigating here and why we need to be careful. So there are a lot of potential benefits that have to do with differentiating learning and instruction, but there are also risk of plagiarism and academic dishonesty. Issues that we're also dealing in our own institution as well. There are great benefits about designing assessments, giving feedback to students, but there is also always the risk of accountability, right? Who is responsible for the assessment? Who is responsible for the feedback? What does that mean for the students and the teachers? There is great potential for personalization. We've seen that throughout the history of AI, not just generative AI, but existing concerns about privacy and data as an asset continues to persist. It's not something that we have figured out. And then there are also potential benefits when it comes to creativity, collaboration, developing different skills, but they do come with the risk of over-reliance and offloading a lot of our cognitive learning that may be otherwise happening. And of course, we all cherish that efficiency, right? We often go for that efficiency, but we sometimes forget that the systems that we use are biased inherently, and they could perpetuate existing inequities and biases. So we are well positioned to harness the benefits and mitigate the risks if we have a systematic approach and if we are trained and also within a regulatory system that provides certain guidance. And the answer to all of that looks like it relies on two words: AI literacy, right? And it is the case that these two words appear everywhere right now. It seems to be the solution to everything, right? AI literacy. So everyone is talking about it. But the important question here, what is it? Can we agree on a definition, right? And in a very fast and emerging space of literature, how does that look like, and how would that likely develop moving forward? So let's dig a little bit further into theoretical foundations of AI literacy. Now, it is not new. The discourse on AI literacy actually started well before generative AI found us with the release of ChatGPT a few years ago. However, there has been an explosion on research in this. So there are a lot of theoretical frameworks that have been proposed by a lot of researchers from many different disciplines. They come from computer science, they come from the learning sciences, they come from sociology in some instances. We also proposed a framework with my colleague Laura Allen. So it is a space that has now become quite crowded with a lot of theoretical frameworks that anchor on different disciplines, right? And we're all trying to answer the question, what does it mean to be AI literate? Because once you answer the question, then you can move towards training, you can move towards assessment. Now, if we look at those frameworks, and there are a little bit over a dozen right now in the literature, what we see is competing visions of what AI literacy looks like. And it does mean different things to different people. A set of models emphasize what we call a technical literacy model. The beginning and the end of those models is foundational knowledge, basically understanding the mechanics of AI, such as algorithms and data and machine learning, neural networks, computational thinking, and much more. But the emphasis here is on knowledge, right? Foundational knowledge. Another set of models takes a different approach. This is the functional literacy approach. And here, the emphasis is on application. So this is all about developing tool proficiency, integrating AI in the workplace, problem solving, automating tasks, and so on. But the bottom line is, are we proficient in applying? AI systems and models in our work. Another set of models emphasizes generative literacy. So how do we create with AI systems, right? Issues like creative collaboration, generating content, workflow design, prompt engineering, and so on, with an emphasis towards innovation. And a final set of models, they take a more critical literacy approach. This is where the emphasis is mostly on questioning the implications of those systems, issues of ethics and bias, their social impact, our human values, our rights and responsibilities. So they're very reflective in that way. So let me pause here, and I do have a poll question for you. It's going to appear in a second. And the question is, which AI literacy model do you think should be prioritized in your context? So let's give everyone the opportunity to respond and then see where you all are. Okay, I can't see the results. Any of the panel coordination can see them? Okay, now they show. Great. So I have functional literacy 26%, generative 11%, critical literacy 29%, and technical literacy 3%. There is also the all equally important with 30%. So we see some variability here, right? And it is what you expect because context really matters. Now, if we're looking for some consolidation, one way to begin integrating these different visions of AI literacy is by looking at what we call the learning trinity. I mean, I'm in the College of Education, we study learning. This is very familiar to us, right? Whenever we talk about learning outcomes, we emphasize knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So knowledge has to do with understanding concepts and theories and principles, and skills has to do with our abilities and competencies, and then attitudes has to do with our values and beliefs and dispositions that we bring in the learning situation. So one way in which we can consolidate and integrate these models is to look across knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And if we do that, then you see a very clear picture where the technical literacy models emphasize primarily knowledge, less so skill, and almost no attitudes. The functional literacy models are all about skill development. The generative literacy emphasizes skill and knowledge and a little bit of attitudes. And then the critical literacy models are mostly about the attitudes, but they also emphasize to a lesser extent knowledge and a little bit of skills. So there are ways in which we could be integrating our approaches if we begin to focus on knowledge, skills, and attitude. And some of that integration began to happen at global levels, right? So we have some big organizations like the UNESCO that already proposed two global competency models, one for students and one for teachers, where they try to integrate and consolidate the literature in the context of AI literacy. Digital Promise also launched an AI literacy framework. Digicom from the European Union also developed a competency map that aligns with a lot of what we've seen in the literature. And then we also have the AI for K-12 big ideas in education. So we have already begun to see some consolidation across the literature, right? And then when we look across those big efforts, we see a more integrative approach. We see a set of components that tend to repeat themselves. So foundational knowledge being one, and this is again about the basic mechanics and scope and technical concepts. Ethical and societal impact is another big component. This is about the socio-technical aspects of the systems, human rights, bias, privacy. Critical evaluation and analysis seems to be very prominent across the models, with critically evaluating AI outputs at their sources, their limitations. And of course, application use and creation tends to exist in those models as well. So we begin to see, some consolidation and some repetition, and that's always a good sign. And wouldn't it be nice if we could consolidate a little bit more and we could all agree on a set of competencies and skills and perhaps definitions, so we would be able to move forward. And such an effort is currently underway. It is coordinated by the European Commission, the Office of Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, and code.org. There is a new AI literacy framework that is currently under development. Is through its second set of iterations with public comment right now. And they did something remarkable, in my opinion. They drew on the existing global frameworks that have been proposed, and they also drew and integrated a lot of the literature that we have seen in the existing frameworks that have been proposed in the literature across different disciplines. So this is a worthwhile effort where there is integration, there is consolidation, and there is negotiation, right? And the goal is a global AI literacy framework that then can guide standard development, competency development, and even training and assessment development in primary and secondary education levels. So I refrained from giving a definition so far about AI literacy because I wanted to go with only one definition. And in my opinion, this is a pretty good one. And this is the one that is proposed by this global and international effort. So they define AI literacy as technical knowledge, durable skills, and future-ready attitudes that enable learners to engage, create with, manage, and design AI while critically evaluating its benefits, risks, and ethical implications. So we see this learning trinity that I highlighted, right? The knowledge, skills, and attitudes. We see very concrete competencies, the engage, create with, manage, and design. And then all of this is situated in a critical, evaluative, and ethical context. So it does a pretty good job, I think, of consolidating and integrating in this space. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done with regards to the specific competencies. So for example, what does engaging with AI mean? What does designing with AI mean? And what does creating or managing AI mean? And that work is underway. But I'm hoping that pretty soon we will have a complete roadmap that would be guiding a lot of the work in this space. Now, as I mentioned, this framework is geared specifically towards primary and secondary education. And of course, the question that is also relevant to us is, what about higher education? Well, the higher education context, interestingly, has moved a little bit slower compared to the K-12 education space. In fact, this is a review that has been recently published. And what you see here is a number of publications since 2020 that focus specifically on AI literacy in K-12 on orange and post-secondary levels with green across the literature. And it is pretty clear that higher education has been a little bit slow to pick up, right? And primary and secondary education have been doing this work a little bit earlier. So they're better positioned to move forward with more consolidation and integration than we are. in higher education. There are several models and frameworks in higher education as well. I want to highlight one that has gained a lot of traction, and you will see some alignment with what we see in primary and secondary education in terms of that integrative and consolidative approach. This framework highlights 4 different pillars or components for AI literacy. The technical one, which is about understanding the fundamentals, about how AI works. The practical one that has to do with application and integration and implementation. And then the evaluative one that is all about critical application and understanding the impacts of those tools, and the ethical aspect as well, maintaining vigilance and being able to protect against bias and misuse. Now, when we look at definitions, this is with an emphasis on teaching and learning and research. So we will see some alignment with what we saw in the context of primary and secondary education, an emphasis on understanding, critically evaluating, and ethically applying AI technologies, specifically in academic context, thinking about teaching and learning, and fundamental knowledge, responsible integration, and critical assessment of biases and limitations. So comparable movement in this space as well, but some consolidation and convergence on at least 4 components that we need to be paying attention to. When we look at our own institution, we had the Artificial Intelligence Task Force mandated by our president. The 3 reports that have been produced, if you have not read them, I highly recommend that you do, in terms of how we can address AI in education, in research, and in our administrative operations. If you look across those reports, you will see AI literacy appearing more than 30 times, right? We also saw a launch of training about AI literacy specifically for our instructors. So that's something that we can all do. And in our strategic planning, we have the strategic imperative that emphasizes innovation to transform the future of learning. And again, here leading AI innovation and learning to work with AI is centered as one of the imperatives that we need to be working on. So, converging on a framework, converging on a definition is definitely a great first step, but where do we go next? I want to highlight a few areas of tension, or a few areas where we don't know enough and perhaps we need to learn more. The first area has to do with the development of AI literacy. Obviously, this is an emergent field, right? And we don't know yet what are the developmental or the learning trajectories of this complex construct, this multidimensional construct of AI literacy. So how does it develop? What does it mean to be AI literate at the age of 12 or 18 or 20 or 30 and so on? So if we consider, primary, secondary, higher education, and those knowledge, skills, and attitudes that cut across the different competencies of AI literacy, we have a lot of work to do to fill in this empty space that you see here. So that's work that has not been done. That's work that needs to be done. And perhaps some of us need to be engaging and to be doing that work. I know that the OECD and European Commission framework will include some learning progressions based on literature, but we yet do not have empirical evidence to support any of that. So we need to be mindful that this is a field that is emerging, and there is definitely a lot more to learn. Another area of tension is the domain specificity of AI literacy. I think we all realize that it does probably manifest differently in our domains and disciplines. And again, that's empirical work that needs to take place. Our US Department of Education has taken the initiative as early as last year with the launch of 4 AI centers across the country, realizing that AI literacy and generative AI specifically will manifest differently across domains. And they funded 4 such centers, 2 for reading and 2 for STEM. So I anticipate that in the next few years, we will begin to learn more. What does it mean to be AI literate in the context of reading? What does it mean to be AI literate in the context of STEM, and so on? So that work is ongoing. Just FYI, the 2 centers on reading, one of them is led by Digital Promise, and they focus on the science of reading. The other one is led by the University of Buffalo, and it focuses specifically on early language development. And then in the context of STEM, one of them is led by University of Washington. It's called Amplify Learn. And then the second one is led by the University of Georgia, where they have the National Genome Center, and they also focus on STEM. So a lot of exciting work that is happening around the country, and I anticipate that's going to inform a lot of our understanding of how AI may differ across our disciplines and how we can best develop AI literacy in this context. Another area of tension has to do with contextualizing and conceptualizing AI literacy in our research and scholarship. Now, this is big, right? And we're grappling with that in our institution also as researchers, as educators, but also as editors, as reviewers. This is something that is fundamental, and we have yet to figure out, again, because it is generally early emerging as a field. Now, one of the things that we need to be mindful about and perhaps worry about is what Messeri and Crockett called the scientific monoculture. I find this paper quite fascinating, so I would encourage everyone to read it. But the idea here is that if all of us, let's say within a domain or within an institution, use the same AI tools in the same ways, we will likely converge on the same blind spots. We will actually converge on the same ideas. And this will likely make, our science more efficient. There will be more convergence, but it will come at a huge cost and a trade-off that has to do with when one approach dominates a field, then it eliminates a lot of the diversity and the innovation, and it will make, all of us vulnerable to error. So this is something that could have far-reaching implications. I do not think we have figured it out yet. I do not think we have thought it through, but it is definitely something for us to consider. To that end, we have a new project that has just been funded by the National Science Foundation that aims to do a little bit of contribution in this space. Is called Emerge AI, and it is about expanding the methods of education researchers, specifically with generative AI. This is led by my colleague, George Veletsianos, in the College of Education and Human Development, and with our colleagues at NC State, Emma Braden and Krista Kladowski. We are developing a curriculum about integrating generative AI into research workflows, specifically for STEM education researchers. And we plan to launch the first summer institute on this coming summer. And hopefully we will have a couple of cohorts, and then we can open up this training even more broadly at our institution, but also nationwide. There are more tensions. I can keep going. I'm gonna mention a few more, and then I'm hoping we can open it up for questions. A big one is, how do we build AI literacy programs that reach all learners? This is our equity challenge, right? And it has to be central in this conversation. We are seeing several critical areas of opportunity gaps here that we need to consider. We have access disparities. Our rural, tribal, and under-resourced schools often lack infrastructure. They lack devices and bandwidth to actually meaningfully engage with such tools. When they require subscriptions, who has the money to pay for those? There are also training inequities, schools with fewer resources. We're already seeing this across our state. They have less capacity to provide professional development. Teachers in this context need to navigate AI without support, where their counterparts in more resourced institutions or places can actually do that easier. We definitely need to attend and address issues of representation in the AI systems themselves. We know that students from marginalized communities are more likely to encounter content in these systems that is trained on data that doesn't reflect their experiences, their cultures, their language, and it's biased. And of course, a big one is workforce, right? AI literacy seems to be becoming a prerequisite for employment. And those without access to quality AI education may face compounding disadvantages in this new, very competitive and AI-driven workplace. So this gap can become a huge opportunity gap. And this is another place where I would love to know your own experiences. So I have another poll question for you. Specifically, which opportunity gap concerns you the most in your context? Curious to see the results. All right. So access to tools, 11%. Training and professional development, that's huge, right? More than half. And then workforce preparation also seems to be gaining some traction. So definitely important concerns for us to consider moving forward. The next tension or challenge, it's a big one. And I'm sure you probably anticipated this coming. This has to do with measurement, right? Okay, we can agree on what AI literacy is, what are its components, how we can teach it. And of course, once you begin to have learning outcomes, then you need to have a way to evaluate those. So assessment and measurement of AI literacy is critical as well. And when we look into the literature, you will see that we have made some progress, but we're still lagging in several areas. A systematic review of AI literacy scales, this has been published earlier last year. It identified about 16 different scales. This should come at probably no surprise to you who follow this area, but 13 of those are self-report measures, right? And that comes with all of the limitations that self-report measures may have. And about 3 of those include performance-based assessments. So demonstrating, in other words, your AI literacy. I love this review because it gives a really good description about the different measures, their features, and their theoretical assumptions, and also their technical adequacy. And it highlights that we have made, as I said, some progress, but we still have quite a bit to go in terms of assessment. And this is really important because in the end of the day, no matter how we define AI literacy, it will be what we assess. It will become what we assess. So assessment cannot be taken lightly. We recently explored one of those measures in our own work. This is just correlational work, but it will show you that there is something there that it can be captured with those AI literacy concepts. We explored to see if there were any relations to critical thinking, to reliance on AI, and to intellectual humility, or this tendency that we have to be open to change. And we saw, kind of what you would expect, like if you have higher AI literacy, then you're more critical. This is a self-report measure of critical thinking. So that negative correlation makes sense. It doesn't mean you're less critical. It means you judge yourself as being less critical in this context. So maybe it gives you more of a critical appraisal of things. Less reliance also on AI, and a higher intellectual humility. But again, this is just purely correlational studies, very emergent field. But those measures have gained quite a bit of traction, and now they begin to be used more and more in the literature. Now, in relation to assessment, I also want to highlight a big development that is happening, and this is PISA 2029. Now, PISA is the big assessment that happens internationally. Traditionally, PISA happens in the areas of reading, math, and science. And the fact that OECD decided to add media and AI literacy in their 2029 assessment is significant because it highlights how central this new set of competencies are. This is for 15-year-olds, so there is an assessment that is being developed. It's going to be administered in more than 100 countries, and we will have results in 2031. But what is really noteworthy about this effort is that this is not an AI literacy assessment. This is a media and AI literacy assessment. And that's intentional. It is intentional because it acknowledges that AI literacy is an emergent field. It doesn't have strong theoretical foundations yet. So we anchor strongly on media literacy that has strong theoretical foundations and assessment foundations, and we build on that towards AI literacy. So lots of exciting work in this space, and we're really looking forward to see where it goes. One more, or maybe two more tensions, and then I will wrap it up, I promise. So this is a big one also. And it has to do with identifying the role of AI tools in AI literacy. Now, this is important because of this trend. This is a recent review, and it shows the following. Earlier, a lot of work that is published in this space, in the context of AI literacy and different AI perspectives, has either a technical or this sociocultural approach. In the last year, it exploded with an emphasis on different tools. So that can be very consequential, right? That's a space we need to negotiate. If we begin to define and evaluate and perceive AI literacy in the context of specific tools, that changes the whole space in ways that is kind of predictable, with a lot of unintended consequences that are not necessarily going to be positive, because those tools are deterministic in many ways, right? They have their own limitations, their own affordances, their own biases. So evaluating and thinking and conceptualizing AI literacy with a tools perspective is very risky. And as we see in the literature, is gaining more and more traction. So that's an area of work that we really need to take seriously. like what is the role of AI tools when we talk about AI literacy? And how much do we want to emphasize that aspect? Obviously, we want some functional literacy, but we cannot be defining AI literacy based on tools alone. And then finally, and this is a big one, I have to say this is the one that keeps me up at night, is for us to understand the short and long-term impacts of AI use on learning. And I know this is probably something that a lot of you are thinking about if you're doing work or thinking about AI literacy in this space. So what happens to our cognition, to our skill development, to our motivation when AI has become so ubiquitous in our lives and in our learning spaces? We recently co-authored a paper and we offered one opinion. I'm sure you also have opinions, and I would love to know what those are, where we made the case that, these LLMs could be bad for learning under certain conditions. So we aim to identify what those conditions are. We hypothesize that it could be when they take away this productive struggle that usually happens in learning, or when they impede mastery of a domain when we are novices and we're trying to become experts. But there are many more conditions that I think we need to be thinking about and identifying so we can understand deeper the impacts on learning. And this is the final poll for you, the final poll question for today. So in your experience, has student AI use primarily helped or hindered their deep learning? All right, let's see where we're at. I made a guess. Oh, wow. Mostly helped, 27%, mixed results, 31%, mostly hindered, 27%, too early to tell. I thought most of us would be at too early to tell, but it seems like we're already having experiences one way or another. So this is really, really informative. Now, all we have right now is a little bit of evidence and some expert opinion. So we are moving forward with more of that. We actually launched an expert consensus project earlier this year with my colleagues at University of North Carolina and UC Irvine, where we are bringing together about 30 learning scientists who do work in this space to identify those conditions that could impact learning, either positively or negatively, along with recommendations. So we hope to have a report at the end of next semester that we can share more broadly. And in our own institution, in the context of the DSAI Hub, we launched the Education and Learning with AI Working Group, or the ELI group, to continue to have these conversations. And I hope you will join us in those conversations. We actually have another event later today. It is led by my colleague, David De Lima. And you will find more info about registering for that in the chat. And we hope that you can join us to continue this kind of conversations. So I know I went a little bit over and I threw quite a bit at you today, frameworks, questions, tensions. But if there is one thing that I would like you to take away is this: AI literacy is not optional. It's not a nice to have. It is infrastructure, it is foundational, and it is urgent. And it's also our collective responsibility from the policy point of view, the education, training point of view, the research point of view. We all have a role to play. And I hope you will join us in the College of Education and in DSAI in intensifying our efforts towards that direction. So with that, thank you. And I'm happy to engage further with your questions.
Excuse me. Thank you, Dr. Kendeou. I'm just monitoring the chat and the Q&A, but I will kick it off with what advice would you give the new CIO once we have a CIO on how to tackle all these tensions?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think anchoring on the literature is really important, right? I think adopting a framework, adopting a definition, and anchoring strongly on those, being strategic and intentional in terms of our efforts, that would be critically important in my mind. And it doesn't matter which actually it does, which framework and which definition, but we have reached enough consensus in the literature for that to be present. So I think we have the work laid out for us to do. And I would engage stakeholders very broadly. We need the learning scientists, we need the computer scientists, we need the sociologists, we need the legal experts and the ethicists. No one should be absent from this conversation.
Thank you. Let's see, we do have a question here. How does the University of Minnesota's AI efforts in teaching and learning compare to our peers?
That is a great question. If you look into the report that came out of the president's task force, you will see there some comparability in terms of what other institutions are doing who may be leading in this space. And I hope that we will be able to do more moving forward as an institution, so we can actually be leading as well. We definitely have the resources and we have the capacity, the human capacity, the infrastructure capacity to do so.
I'll just ask this next one. You mentioned 4 Department of Education AI centers that were opened, and I noticed the date on that was September of 2024. Given all of the federal pressures, are those still open, and do you anticipate them to stay open?
They're still open, and we hope that they will continue to remain open.
Getting lots of hearts and thank you notes. Not so many questions, though. I'll throw one more out there. I'm just curious if this is what you're seeing. Our office facilitates something called the IT Stakeholder Survey. So it's a survey on all the tools of the university, where people are at, and one of the benchmarking questions they've asked 2 years ago and now again has to do with people's trust in AI. And the new results tentatively, hopefully I can share this here, I hope I can, is we're seeing a little bit more of a critical thinking approach to the tools, to the overall idea of usage, disciplinary, specific issues. Did you have any comments on that? Does that validate what you're seeing?
That is definitely positive, a positive development, I would say, if we see more critical mindsets. We do see high trust in some of our research where we develop the tools in a very constrained way, and we have participants interacting with those tools. So I think we are at the point where people are making a distinction in terms of, is this a tool in the wild, or is this an educational tool that can make a difference in terms of their trust and engagement with those technologies. As I mentioned, AI has been around for a while. We have been developing educational tools that are, launched in school context and they're used by students. And definitely in those cases, we do want high trust. And we have done the empirical work to justify that trust, right? Our worry is with the tools that are not educational and they have become open and accessible to everyone to use for the purpose of education.
That's, it looks like we have a follow-up question from Laura, and then hopefully we can squeeze in a question from Mark. Laura's follow-up, uh, what would it take for the University of Minnesota to lead in this space?
Coordinated effort. As I mentioned, we have a lot of capacity. We have the DSAI Hub, we have the Center for Educational Innovation, we have extremely qualified experts in the College of Education and Human Development, in CSE, in many, many spaces. Consolidated strategic effort.
Consolidated strategic effort. Okay. And question from Mark, AI literacy applications would seemingly vary according to each field. If that is the case, are you imagining that each department would offer their own AI literacy courses?
That is a great question, and I would love to ask the question back. I think that's something that disciplinary experts will need to address. I do think there are general aspects of domain literacy that could be universal, but there are definitely domain-specific aspects that need to be addressed and disciplinary-specific aspects that need to be addressed. Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I know we're trying to find a question or two that came in from the registration form, but we're having a little bit of trouble finding those. So I'll just put it out for anybody else who has any remaining questions in the last 3 minutes here. I have to say, from an assessment perspective, this was extraordinarily informative. We have a lot of tension as we discern whether AI should be used for questionnaire design. We're certainly not to the point where it should be used for data analysis yet. But some of the questions you ask about measures of AI literacy, I'm almost crying because I wish we had a lot of funding so we could go and be proactive and get ahead of those issues. And sometimes I feel like we're just a little bit behind. But then when I go to other conferences, I see that Madison isn't any further ahead than we are. Neither is Michigan, neither is Northwestern. So we're doing a lot, and they're trying to make do with the time and resources they have. So on that note, I think, since I'm not seeing any other questions, do you have any final comments for us or suggestions, anything at all?
I think I would just like to thank everyone for joining us. I know we don't have a lot of answers and we have a lot of questions, and that's a healthy space to be right now, for us to be asking the right questions and to be critical about these efforts while we also push for things to move forward. So thank you. And if you want to engage more in these spaces, as I mentioned, the DSAI Hub, the Eli at Minnesota group, we would be delighted to continue those conversations in those spaces as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Kendeou, for joining us today, and best of luck in your ventures. And I wish everybody on this call a great 2026.